Phil Rucker from the Washington Post, Senator, was in the room. I wanted to ask Phil about the dynamic in the room when Jonathan Lemire and the Reuters correspondent Jeff Mason both challenged President Trump and President Putin. Phil?
As a colleague of theirs, I was proud of them. They were very direct, straightforward questions. I don't know that Putin was expecting that. That's certainly not what he's used to back in Moscow. I have to tell you, off to the side, sitting next to Sarah Sanders, was Dmitry Peskov, who you know as Putin's spokesman, and he was chuckling at times. He seemed a little bit kind of gleeful. I don't know what to make of it, but that was a weird response that he had. But I think the reporters, we were all waiting for Trump to do what Jonathan Lemire asked him to do, which was say, really confront Putin directly and say, do you believe the U.S. intelligence conclusions, or do you believe what Vladimir Putin just told you? And as we saw, the president declined to do so.
And when you mentioned Peskov, Dmitry Peskov, of course, is someone very well known to Mike McFaul here, who served in the embassy in Moscow, and you know him very well. Clearly, they were ebullient coming out of that news conference.
They couldn't ask for a better outcome. I mean, it was shocking. The bar, remember, the bar was so low for President Trump. The expectations were so low. All he had to do was just push back on what I thought were very obvious questions that he knew were coming. He chose not to do that. He made a conscious decision to side with Putin against his own government, not the Obama administration government people, by the way. His own director of national intelligence, Mr. Coates, he said, I agree with Putin. I wonder what Mr. Coates thinks. Should he, what would you think if you were in that job in front of the entire world? I thought it was really a disappointing performance by our president.
And to that point, Wendy Sherman, if you're still there, how do the cabinet members, how does John Kelly, how do the others, the newly confirmed head of the CIA, Gina Haspel, how do any of these officials do their jobs, work with the FBI, and interact with Rod Rosenstein and others in the government when you've had the President of the United States disavowing the entire investigation and calling it a disaster on the world stage?
I would hope, Andrea, that they really will do some soul searching today and decide what they're doing here and what they're trying to do. We come out of today, I certainly come out of today, much more concerned about the 2018 election, because Putin was basically given a go-ahead signal to continue to do what he has done in the 2016 election. So unless John Kelly and Haskell and everyone else says that we need to name someone in the White House with lots of money behind that person to ensure that all of our electoral systems are safe, then I'm very concerned about what will happen in 2018 and who will be held responsible for failure if, in fact, we do have a polluted election. And then finally, at the bottom of all of this is really sowing distrust in American institutions, in American democracy. And I agree with an earlier speaker. It's time for Americans to be out on the streets and to speak up about the democracy that we hold dear, the values we hold dear, and what we expect of the President of the United States. He represents us, not himself.
Well, Wendy, we understand the president has left the palace, and we understand that next he will be departing Helsinki once he motorcades to the airport. He does have several interviews that he is doing, and it'll be interesting to see what kinds of questions he gets from those interviews.